Hey everybody, it's great to be here. We got an exciting presentation for you on data catalogs. I am a developer advocate here at Dagster Lab. I have my Twitter and GitHub handle there. So today we'll be discussing what is a data catalog, a quick history of data catalogs, the unfulfilled promise of the modern data stack and how that impacts data catalogs, our approach, and we'll do a demo of our data catalog, and then we'll have a quick Q&A session. So, what is a data catalog? Well, it's like a product catalog, except it's focused on data assets. It talks about what it is, who owns them, the lineage of the assets, columns associated with them. Catalog is often a term that's thrown around, like in AWS Glue or Databricks. Those are more operational in nature and basically an information schema. Data catalogs work by taking in the metadata, indexing and categorizing them so you can then discover and browse your data assets in an intuitive way. One way that I like to think about it and like a experience that came back to me when I was thinking about this, the catalog should be like a library where the books are laid out in an intuitive way so you can embark on your own journey of discovery and you can embark on your own journey of discovery without much aid and browse and go as deep as you'd like. So, a timeline of data catalogs. Catalogs address the fundamental problem of once the volume of knowledge exceeds what can be contained in one person's brain, you need to have an efficient way to index and categorize and retrieve it in an efficient manner. And information also demands standardization. And cataloging information technology often lags behind the technology used to generate this data. So oftentimes you have this periods where there's this like divergence and convergence of there's this big technological change and then and then a bunch of different competitors come along to try and be the standard system before eventually we settle on a system that will be the standard going forward. So starting at the beginning, 5,000 years ago, in ancient Sumeria, they used cuneiform tablets, which I'm sure we're all aware of. You remember from history class, which are these ta clay tablets that are fired in a kiln and are used and are marked with this special type of pen they had back in the day to create all these indexes. And what was cool about them is they're super durable. Some of these are like 5,000 years old and they're still in good condition in museums. They used a standardized method of writing. And then like one of the more interesting parts of this, which like kind of jumped out to me, is like when I learned how they use like proto metadata. So at the end of each of these tablets, they would write who created them, what's it's about. They even had different versions of tablets that they would use over time. And this fun fact kind of threw me for a loop that they would use like physical tags that they would like append on these tablets to denote like the category, like, oh, this one is like a government policy, this one's a tax transaction, this one's like a receipt. So it's funny that like technologically, often humans figure out the best way a long time ago, and the tech is just trying to come back to that original vision. And then, kind of after the fall of Rome, civilization kind of took a dip for a few years there. And that lack of standardization and kind of general interest in knowledge led to information being a lot more fragmented. The medieval monks kept the tradition alive in their scriptorias, which are their kind of old-timey libraries, where monks would get together, copy, edit, and organize manuscripts. They would have kind of one or two guys whose primary job is like categorizing and indexing. They would just kind of group them together by subject matter, author, that type of deal. And then the catalogs they were physically maintained by that like head monk who would make sure that catalog was up to date. So it was a very manual process. And one thing I learned that was like interesting about this is for particular texts that were rare or heretical, wherever the case may be, they would chain them They would chain the books to the desk, and then the monk that was reading them would be chained to that same desk as well. So that's like a old school hardcore way to do data governance, which I found interesting. And the monks would also use illumination. Since these books were often like very big and dense and handwritten, they would create these cool, pretty pictures that they would use to denote like, hey, this is an important passage, or this is something you need to pay attention to. And then along the line in 1515, I believe, Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press. And that really kind of allowed the creation of information and text to take off in an exponential way, which led us to the Dewey Decimal System, which was developed in the 1870s, I believe. And it was a uniform classification system for libraries to index and easily retrieve um, different texts. And what's cool about it is it used an informational or a numerical classification system that's also hierarchical. And having it be numerical allows for expansion into new subjects. And also you can just add another digit. So if another book or text is created, you can like quickly loop it into the schema, as it were. And I don't know, I remember learning about this in school, and it was tough to really understand contextually why you would need a system like this. But then when you go into like a used bookstore where it isn't organized, it's like impossible to find what you're looking for. And then relational databases. These were invented in the early 70s in kind of a response to the IBM mainframes of the era that like once computers became like more widely available, you needed a better system of like standardizing data storage and retrieval. And I'm sure everybody here is quite familiar with SQL, but again, information demands standardization. You got numerical indexes, and it's kind of like an improvement on previous tools. But because it was so easy to create all this information, we currently have a data volume problem where we create so much of it, but we don't have tooling in place that supports making use of it easy. And I know a lot of us in the data space, we have so many different tools. And I would say that like maybe the Unix approach of having like the perfect tool for the job isn't ideal when you have 20 of these perfect tools that don't interface well with each other. And it leaves us with a really like disjointed experience. And a lot of catalogs depend on that metadata exhaust. And a lot of these tools like don't provide any. A certain other orchestrator and or certain other orchestrator I won't mention doesn't give any metadata exhaust, which makes it challenging to build these catalogs. And I know at a previous organization, we tried to build an internal data catalog, and we ran into this issue that you often see with some of these projects where there was this overhead maintenance in building and maintaining it. The catalog was constantly out of sync. And as with a lot of like non-value focused projects, it was constantly pushed to the back burner. And then the director that proposed it ended up leaving the company like 9 months later. And we had this like half-baked catalog that was like super out of date. And the project ended up failing. And we fell back on our old school way of doing things where it's just like there's the data engineers that built the platform, they know how it works. They know where everything is, and just go to them if you have a question, which is kind of not a very like tech forward way of doing things. And then we were promised this better data governance. Instead of this like top down locking down data and then doling it out to whoever needs it, we were promised this collaborative stewardship. And uh, like there's this challenge when it comes to knowing what's in your platform. And if you have an easier way to index and then visualize what you have, then that facilitates better data governance. And like in your catalog, you want to know your data lineage, the metadata associated with assets, tagging PII, so you can better comply with regulations. And then you also want like comprehensive audit trails for different data sources, their movement, the usage tracking. And finally, like if governance isn't taken seriously, you often will have data silos, which in bigger organizations that'll translate into operational silos, where you have duplicate work happening and you don't have good communication, and you're not making the most out of your data. Documentation debt. Like I mentioned before, d how data platforms work is traditionally held in tribal knowledge by those that build it, and that leads to a problem where like if this key person leaves, like you're suddenly left with this really kind of gaping hole of knowledge that takes like a while to get back, and building that back up is can be stressful for whoever's left, and you want to minimize those uh, opportunities whenever they present themselves. And if you implement the catalog, you can minimize the amount of like tech debt and duplicate work that's created. Because if people know and have a good idea of what data you already have, you reduce the amount of duplicate requests you have. And you also don't end up this situation where you have all these like shadow data and models that like you're not sure if they're 100% up to date, who used them last, who created them. And you're losing a lot of value when you don't have like a good picture of all the data you have. And we have Werner Herzog here talking about how the trees are in misery, the birds are in misery. I don't think they sing, they screech in pain. And that's whenever you're onboarded a new company, you talk to like the senior person that holds all this tribal knowledge. They'll often give you that dead stare and dramatic look. And documentation as code. This has kind of been a recent trend in the data space where um, we're kind of shifting away from like no code, and people, especially engineers, are preferring using code as a source of truth for things because it is a source of truth. It's versioned for change tracking. It's collaborative through the whole version control Git process. And you also have that flexibility and ownership. So you don't have vendor lock-in when it's all code that you have written. And it's highly customizable to meet your team's specific needs. And it also supports automation in the form of automated testing, continuous deployment, all those types of things. So there's a lot of benefits from using code as your source of truth. It's also the most up to date. And as we have an example Dagster asset here that shows in the top all the different metadata associated with it that goes into building the data catalog that we use. And finally, this is our approach that kind of we went through the problem, and this is how Dagster solves for it. Fighting tool fatigue. So, like I mentioned, there's a ton of tools out there. And there's nothing that drives me more crazy than when I have to like constantly switch between tools and go through like an endless loop of SSOing and doing two-factor authentication. And that really eats into the day. And ideally, you want to have the tool that you're doing the work in also be the tool that you use to discover and understand the data in your platform. And additionally, when you have another tool, that's another thing you have to onboard and train. And oftentimes, tool integrations rarely work 100%. So you're going to need to do additional integration configuration to make your business use case. And in a lot of times, that's not really worth your time. And there's like higher level things you could do. And that's why it's better to just like have some tool consolidation, I think. And then it's another tool. So that's another thing you gotta manage. It has a budget line item. You gotta manage authentication, permission, seats, training and internal knowledge. And that kind of takes us away from our job as data platform engineers of building and shipping pipelines. And then here at Dagster, we're big on developers. I don't know about y'all, but I can like hear this video with the sound off. But it's not ergonomic for us developers to create additional workflows to organize and categorize our data assets. So that's what's cool about software-defined assets is they have the option to be supplied with the expressive metadata like tagging, column schema, what code location they're in, all that type of data, and it's pulled right into the catalog. And that minimizes your overhead because you don't need to adjust your additional workload to have your catalog be up to date and built properly. And then when like you onboard new devs, you have this data catalog that's there, that's intuitive to interface with, and it's easy for new users to come in and get a sense of what the data landscape looks like, and you don't have to bother them, which they always appreciate. I know when I started here, I was able to use our data catalog since we use Dagster, of course. And it was like really intuitive and simple for me to go in and be like, okay, this is how like this pipeline is set up. This is what feeds into these end assets. So I was able relatively quickly to make sense of our data platform and then ship to it, which was great. And then we're going to pop into our Huli instance, and I'm going to do a quick demo of our data catalog. So here we are inside our Huli. I don't know if you guys have seen Silicon Valley, but we're big fans over here. And for example, I just started at Huli and I have this machine learning model that I want to better understand how it works. So let's see if we have a view for those because the person onboarding me said we did. So let's go over to our forecasting assets. And then I want to search model in here. And then it takes us to our asset page where we can see when it ran, the different grouping definitions. We can look at the source code over here. And then I'm going to pop over to lineage. And I want to see what feeds into it. So we have this model over here. Looks like we got a scikit-learn step over here. I want to know more about this weekly order summary DBT model. So we can see the SQL behind here. Number of orders. That's an interesting column. I want to see what's into that. So we can see the column level lineage here, which is a powerful aspect of Dagster Plus. And then we can see it's coming from this order status. Pop over here. Order stats. Okay. So that what makes up here. And then I'm curious, this Guilfoyle character has been mentioned on a lot of these assets. So I wonder what he is also behind. And the different things you can search by in the Dagster catalog are the owner, the kinds like Snowflake S3 DBT, the code locations, and any columns associated with them. So let's see what assets Guilfoyle are associated with. And what's cool about these filters is you can apply them on the global asset lineage page too, and it'll filter down to your relevant assets. So let's go back here. And then, as we can see here, the good old global lineage view, we have these orders and models that feed into these DBT models. And then this final model here is how we get all this machine learning stuff over here. Now I have a better sense of like what the computations and the journey that our data takes before it ends up in the endpoint. And I didn't have to pop into a database or look through a bunch of Jupyter Notebook or SQL files. And I didn't have to leave the tool either. So that was a great experience, I'd say. All right. And then in closing, we built the Dagster catalog to be the system of record because we think the orchestrator is the perfect layer to build your catalog off of because it has a holistic view of all the production data assets in your system. And it's an ideal place to do your discovery and troubleshoot a pipeline or anything like that. With the developer experience, you don't have to build any additional engineering hours. And the catalog is generated from the pipeline that you intend it to be. And having that intention, as opposed to your tool just getting any metadata exhaust it has from it, is a really powerful from a developer perspective because you don't have to do any additional work to get something that's fully serviceable for your platform engineers. And like as I mentioned, it's just like better data discovery. So instead of like digging through files and digging through like a GitHub repo or a code base, you can just kind of browse, like I mentioned at the beginning, like a library. And you can just kind of go as deep as you'd like. And then within Dagster in our UI, you can also see like the source behind something and it'll link to like a your GitHub repo for the tool that you need. And then in closing, you should join our Dagster Slack if you haven't already. You should also check out, if you haven't checked out Dagster Plus yet, you can use your own code and inside the free trial, it supports the data catalog. So if you want to see what it would look like for your organization, now's a perfect time to check out a trial. And then, of course, follow us on social. Additionally, we have coming up in November Data Platform Week, which will go over all the exciting things we got going at Dagster as we ship changes to the platform. So make sure you don't want to miss that. And then I'm going to open it up to Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alex. I always love those analogies to like the ancient Sumerians and how appropriate it is even now with how we're dealing with our data. We've actually had a few questions already. I'll just comment on Edson, who said that, uh, what did he say? What most companies need when they talk about data governance is a data catalog with access control, RBAC. If we could bring that into Dagster, it would definitely set it apart. That's actually funny that you bring that up. It is something that's on our radar. It's something that we're exploring, and hopefully we'll have something more to share soon around that. But yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Uh, Somebody also asked, is the data catalog features only available in Dagster Plus? Right now, that's correct. Most of the features of the data catalog are Dagster Plus only. Okay, and we have some unanswered questions here too that we can go through. This user asked, how do we enable the column lineage on our Dagster Plus? Is there a minimum version of dbt that is required? I'm not actually sure about the minimum version. I was under the impression that the column level lineage would work out of the box, but there's probably a minimum version of Dagster that you would need. That's something that we can get back to you on. If you join us in the Dagster Deep Dive channel and create a follow-up thread, we can definitely get the answer for you. Nigel asked, can any of that catalog or a subset of it be exported to a PDF or something similar that you could share with partners? Um, Dagster does support exporting lineage view and stuff like that as SVGs or PNGs if you want to embed that in a PDF or something along those lines. The catalog itself doesn't have much export functionality, but I think that's a pretty great idea and something that we can bring up with the engineering team. Rob said, can you show the screen again that shows the properties for an individual asset? Alex, I don't know if that's something that you have available, um, but here you go. Yeah. So this is
And
all so you can talk to it if you want, Alex.
yeah, this is like a DBT asset. And what I love about Dagster and our DBT assets is it shows the core, the SQL behind it. So you can like immediately see. And then we have the columns here. Um, if y'all aren't aware, DBT tests come through as Dagster asset checks. And then we can see the pass fail history over here. Is there any particular thing you wanted to see on the asset details?
He said, nope, just the overall view of it.
Cool.
Let's see. We had this question here from Liam.
Mhm.
saying in the beginning you distinguished data catalogs like Glue versus what Dagster provides. What would you call the two types of data catalogs here? Operational catalog versus observable catalog, or what would the terminology be?
I think the way to think about it is who is the like target end user for your catalog. Something like in AWS Glue, that's like if you're just like a straight up data engineer, you need to know this. Our catalog is more for folks that are building and maintaining the platform. We've also heard from our customers that folks like BI analysts really appreciate our view too, because they can see like, all right, what this is all the steps that led up to my final asset or model. And then there's like a another class of catalogs that are for primarily targeted at non-data engineers and straight up data consumers. And those don't show you as much rich metadata behind your assets or are more focused on like governance and those sorts of use cases.
Great. We did have a question about the column level lineage and how that works. That's something that is um, built into some of our integrations, like the dbt integration, and uses libraries like SQLglot to be able to kind of look at like the AST, like the syntax tree of your SQL queries to kind of see what columns are being used. It's not implemented for all of the assets that you would have in your instance, but a subset of things like SDF or dbt or these kind of like SQL-based transformation frameworks. Um, the implementation is open source. So if you go to the Dagster monorepo and you look at the Dagster dbt integration, you can actually see how that works. Cool. I think this user asked, is there a general asset overview available in the catalog? Something like um, all the assets used. Let's wait, what is this? The asset view available in previous Dagster versions. So just a way to see all of the assets.
Yeah, the global lineage, I think, is what they're asking.
Yep, so that's still available.
And that also works on catalog mode. So if you like looked up owners and then clicked global lineage, you would only see what you filtered on.
Yeah, and I don't know, I really appreciate the catalog for when you ha are in a production system with like hundreds and thousands of assets, maybe like the global lineage view becomes kind of like unwieldy at that point, and the catalog interface is really helpful for like drilling down on like exactly the area you want to focus on.